Hey guys, as you can see, we're in Unreal Engine 5. So, welcome to the stream, guys. How are you guys doing? Now, haven't been streaming since Friday night, and that's basically because we were getting everything ready and moving it all over to Unreal Engine 5. Okay, so for those interested in how it was done, basically I wrote two editor helpers which output the static meshes. So this is the output, and I'll show you what the output looks like. Now, when I output it, I obviously run this in 4.27, this particular widget, right? And because it was world composition, what I had to do was load every single map, because it would appear what I came to the conclusion was that with world composition, each individual map had an offset to the persistent level, which meant that, for example, if a map was 100 by 100 offset to the persistent map, then and an object or a static mesh in that map was also at position 100, if you loaded the individual map, it would say 100, right? But if you loaded everything into the persistent map and then exported it from there, then it would load in the offset as well, so it would give you 200. Okay, so when I first did this, outputting from 4.27, all of the things in this particular section of the map, like for example these docks and stuff, all of this stuff here, all the houses up here, would end up in the middle of the mountain, okay? But when we loaded every single map from the persistent map in 4.27, then the offset would be correct. Okay, so let's have a look at the output again. I think we had a look at this on Friday, but I'll just explain it again to you guys so that you get an idea of what I actually did. So basically what we did was we set up a text file. Then we basically read it, and then we add to it, okay, if there's something already there. Then we get all actors of a static mesh, then we loop through that. Now let's just explain this here. We've got our string, okay, and these are just the buttons, so we're not really doing very much with variables here. We only have our string, which is then going to be written to the file, okay? So basically we get the static mesh component, we get the path file for the loaded asset, then we basically get the transform, location, rotation and scale, and then what we basically do is we get the path name, then we write it, then we get a comma. We write the transform XYZ with commas in between, everything's got a comma. Then we write the rotations X, Y and Z, commas in between. Then we get the break vector, which is now the scale, and we write XYZ with commas. And then we get the display name of the object from 4.27, and we add that in as well. And we basically loop with a end of line at the end. You'll notice this has got an end of line, right? And that builds up our string with all the actors that we want in our file. Okay? Then once we've run through the whole of that, built up our big long string, we basically say get the current level name. We do pretty much nothing with it. This was for when I wasn't doing it in one big file and I was splitting into levels, but that just took way longer, right? And then we save the file with the string. Okay, now what that ends up giving us is this file here. And we can open it with Notepad. Okay. And if I drag it right out, you'll notice that it gives us the path to our asset. This is X, Y, Z, rotation X, rotation X, rotation Z, scale X, scale Y, scale Z, and the actual name of the asset in 4.27. Okay, so this isn't perfect, this name here, but at least it does split it up a bit. Okay, so basically this is one huge file, and this actually has 6,800 static meshes. Okay, so we just basically output that, and that gives us all of our lovely meshes, the positions, the actual static mesh, the rotation, the scale, the name of it, so that we're ready to import it. Okay, now remember, because we've loaded it, or we've output this with all of our levels loaded within the persistent mesh and not on an individual basis, it's given us the correct offsets for the actual XYZ. So close that for now. So basically what we did is we created a persistent level, then recreated it from the height map that we were already using, which is obviously, you can see it here, set up the landscape properly again, and then basically used this editor widget, which is obviously going to be in 5.1, because at this point we're importing into 5.1. We got the graph, you click on the button, we've got a couple of variables here. We have the file path, which is just basically where that file that we just looked at was actually stored, right? We read the file. We've got the mesh info as a string array, because what we're going to do is we're going to parse it twice. We're going to parse each line, which is basically the mesh info, and then we're going to parse it by the commas to get each individual value. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we're going to parse it into an array, which is going to be the mesh info, as you can see here. Then we parse it again with the commas. Then we basically break it out again. So we're doing the inverse of what we were doing with the export. 0 is obviously the load asset, so we just load the asset from the asset path. We spawn a mesh actor, which is basically what the static mesh actors are, and we set up the transform from all the splits. So 1, 2 and 3 is the location, 4, 5, 6 is the rotation, 7, 8, 9 is the scale, and 10 is our display name. So we basically set up our actor with the display name. You can see there 177, 178. If I hadn't done this, these would all just be SM shear. Right, now this isn't exactly clear, but at least it gives an idea of where things are. Right, these shears should all be kind of in the same area, because they were all sort of given names in this, you know, at the same time. They're all built out at the same time, right? So then we get our static mesh component, and we're casting our asset to a static mesh, and then we set the static mesh. Okay, takes about 6 to 10 seconds, and we basically load in 6,772 meshes. So that is why you see all of these meshes, right? These are all these meshes have been loaded in with my export import tools, and you can see here that everything is matching up to the landscape. We can see it better if we move up to like houses and stuff. You can see that our stairs are going up the hill properly, our buildings are at the right heights, everything is looking good. Right, now we can look at this from our start position. If you remember the start position, guys, let me know. Now we are going to have to do the foliage again, and some other things, but you can see here that this was our start point, and this was always kind of snowy around about here, which we are working on. But you can see that our stairs here are perfect. We can also look at another place on the map. Where we have a hillside village. Now, as I said, I only exported and imported the static meshes. Okay, now that's not to say I can't do point lights, I can't do blueprints or anything else, but I have been instructed by my colleague that he is going to set a lot of this stuff back up. So you can see here, again, we've got stuff working nicely, everything in the right place. As I said, I think there's some things with bridges and stuff that aren't quite right, and it's probably because this part of it is like a blueprint rather than anything else. Now, what I could do in this case is to load up and actually move these blueprints, right? You'll maybe see it up here. Oh no, that's a static mesh, but obviously this curved one is not a static mesh, right? You can see we've got watchtowers up there. As I said, you can go up around the mountain, etc, etc. So that is working kind of how we want. Now we do have a couple of issues, right? Number one is the snow and the displacement of the snow, right? Because you can see that none of the snow is appearing on the landscape. Right, now we do have, I believe, now these are obviously going to be better once we, have we got a displacement? Yeah, we have got a displacement, right, which is this thing here. Now this ground meshes, I believe we need to add the landscape. Right. And we probably do need to grab some other settings here, but fundamentally, if I save all here, I wonder, I'm going to try something. I'm going to move this to where it kind of should be. So this is like the start point. And if we try it, I'm going to press save all. And press play. Now we have an issue with CPP, day and night cycle. Now I actually got this working the other day, don't know how I did it, but anyway. We're gonna have to wait. This is, I believe this is the first time I've ever run this in Unreal Engine 5 with this build. Which, as I said, is the first ever build. The reason it took us so long is basically it was the GitHub sharing stuff that really took a long time. Basically, I tried to upload the changes on the Friday night, and we knew it was going to take a while, right? So I just basically left it, and by the time it hit 12 o'clock on Saturday, we're like, this isn't going to happen. So we basically left it at that. Now you can see your character is not shaded. Not too many shaders to do. Right, so we're missing the compass. We're missing the compass texture. Right. So we're going to need to do something with that, obviously. As I said, it's now going to be just getting things together. This CPP day and night cycle, not 100% sure about that one, but it was running in another version, So we could take a look. And we are also not getting weather. We are getting the sea, which is great. So we are probably going to have to pull some stuff in from a different location. Right. So actually, let's try and do that now, shall we? So, if I go to our C drive, right, and we look at the project, interesting. So the question here has to be, where is our compass widget? Right, so this suggests this material isn't right. Right. And obviously we have something that's a problem here. Hmm. Interesting. Well, that seems to work. That was no rhyme or reason there, by the way. That was just me trying that. Hey, Lucid Dreams, mate. If you join later, that's fine. We'll try this again, make sure we've got our compass back up. And there we go, compass. Compass is back working again. Hi Northland. A kind of apt name really. We can now see that our character is up and running. Now, I was going to make a suggestion to my colleague. Your subscriber 999, thank you very much Northland, that's much appreciated. We're one away then from the big 1000. As I said, doesn't really make any difference because I'm still 1,000 hours short So if you really want to help now, just open yourself a little browser, put it on mute and play a playlist from my videos, and that would help as well if you don't mind. Right, so what my idea, don't know what's going on here, that looks a bit weird. There must be a blueprint underneath that or something. I'm guessing there's some kind of house blueprint here. Okay, now what I was considering, what do you guys think, is, I mean, I could build it over here or something, but what I was going to make was different little parts as a kind of a test map within our map. Yeah? A test map within our map where we're going to have a part where you can check out houses, a part where you can check out the monsters, a part where you can check out, this isn't, well, I suppose it's not a bad area, but I wanted like a play area where we can actually start testing stuff in the game, right? Oh, here's another little house. I've never actually studied this map to any great degree, really. It's obviously easier when there's no foliage and trees and snow on the ground, but yeah. So that's what I was thinking. What I was thinking was to set up an area so that we can move the player start to the different areas, and then basically so that we're not going into the test map, right? Now, here's the thing, and one of the things that we do need to check. So now that we've got the compass fixed, we're going to do a save all. I'm going to do my first push on the Unreal Engine 5 build later today. As you can see, we're going to have bad blueprint stuff. That's the day-night cycle. I'll tell you what we could do, right? No, I've not got gold. Alright. Ah, okay. Right, okay. We actually don't need these, right? There's two of them. There's another one you'll see underneath. Yeah, I fixed these the other day, right? So now we can compile it. And now, look what happened. Look what happened, guys. We're preparing shaders. Having my coffee. How do you guys have your coffee? Got a funny story about that, right? I can have it all the way from all completely made with milk to black, right? Now the reason that I ended up making it black was when I worked as a contractor programming, I worked like in a small team. Like there was teams out, like what it was there was different, we had programmers, we had systems guys, we had all sorts, and they worked in banks, they worked all over the place, right? This was in Edinburgh, right? And so you'd have a couple of guys out at a bank, a couple of guys out at an insurance company. They'd be working on like system stuff. Then there was a in-house programming team, right? So I'm just blathering, by the way, because this is just doing shaders. Is it doing shaders? I think it's doing shaders. If not, it's not looking as good as I thought it was. It is doing something. Right? So what we used to end up having to do look at that. Right, so now we've got some volumetric fog, as you can see by the fogginess. Right, but we need to change that. We need to change our you see, it's still doing shit, right? Because we have got weather, we have got snow, right? Anyway, let me tell this story. So basically, if you made the mistake of going and making a coffee, you basically had to make a coffee for everybody, right? So you can imagine there was about 8 of us, right? 8 of us plus plus the big boss plus the receptionist. I can't remember if we made the reception or she didn't drink coffee or whatever. But so that made it that you were going to have to make 8 Cybershell. You're a bit of a... Yeah, that's just not how programmers do it, mate. We don't go for things like that. Right, although a maple syrup thing is actually a good idea in this instance, actually. When you hear what I'm going to tell you, right? So basically, you had to take an order, and it was like milk 2 sugars, no sugar 2, no sugar milk, milk 1 sugar, milk 2 sugars, you know, blah 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 blah. And you had to try and remember all that, right? And then basically everybody just went, screw that. Everybody's getting it black. Right, so that's how I ended up like being able to drink coffee anyway, either with sugar, without sugar, with milk, no milk, all milk, zero milk. It was just basically because the programmer was too lazy to try and remember what everybody drank. Yeah, so anyway, we've got weather. It was about that. I thought I was going to have to do some mucking around there, but obviously not. Right, now, back to more serious stuff, right? Although there's nothing more serious than your coffee, right? Especially in the morning. And probably the only reason I don't drink tea is because I live in Mexico, right? Because you can't get... Well, I don't know if you can get it anymore. Right, when I first came here, there was a section in our supermarket. It was a Walmart, right? And they actually had, like... I was astounded. They didn't have... They had some British stuff. And the most incredible thing was, and Mr. Spock will acknowledge this, they, believe it or not, had Abernethys. It was about the only thing. I was absolutely astounded. Abernethy biscuits. I was like, oh my god, we're in heaven. Right, didn't have baked beans, Heinz baked beans, didn't have... Well, they've got Heinz tomato ketchup here anyway, but that's not the point. If you know how niche Abernethy biscuits are, even in Scotland, for them to appear in a Walmart in Mexico, it's like a unicorn. Right, so you're an hour. You're an hour in front, so it's 3:35 for you, Toad Medicine, right? But yeah, Abernethy biscuits. Couldn't believe it. But the problem was that basically they basically gradually stopped stocking that stuff. And it basically became generic, you've never heard of it type things. And it was the same with Drambuie. You could get Drambuie, right? And quite a few. You could get various. The funny thing is here, right? Anybody knows anything about whiskey, especially if you live in Scotland, there's a million whiskies, right? And everybody knows the kind of de facto, whether you like whiskey or not, you know, you've heard of, like, Glenfiddich is a good one, but, you know, especially when I need to think about it off the top of my head, I basically can't remember, right? But, so you'll get Drambuie, oh sorry, well Drambuie was a bit of a, must have taken a while to get used to the new foods. Not really. Because they do, you know, you go to a supermarket, you can buy hamburgers, buns, hot dogs, steaks, whatever. Right? You don't need, it's not all tacos and, well, I mean, you could if you wanted. Right, but anyway, what I wanted to show you now was the two major issues we have with basically Unreal Engine 5. If it's, yeah, well, it might be one issue, but it kind of shows it. It's kind of two, really. Now, you'll notice that the test map I didn't actually do anything with. Now, because this is a standalone map and doesn't need to be imported into another part map, which obviously, therefore, it's not a world composition map, right? It's just a straight level, nothing special about it. It actually, you can leave it the way it is, right? And it'll load in and look fine. Which, for the test map, is perfect, right? As you'll see in a minute. And it sort of shows the issues, right? Of whether we've got a problem with the maps itself or what asset is causing us a problem. Yeah, so anyway, my question was, right, this is a good question for Toad Medicine as well, especially if he's a whiskey drinker, right? This is the strange thing I found in Mexico, right? As I said, coming from Scotland, home of whiskey, million whiskies, the most popular whiskey here. If you named it back in Scotland, everybody will go, what? Never heard of it. Right? It's called Buchanan's. Right, now apparently, I'm not a whiskey drinker, right, so I can't tell you. But apparently, it's actually an okay whiskey, but it's really quite expensive, right? So, Mr. Spock, tell me if you've ever heard of Buchanan's whiskey. Probably not. I'd never heard of it, right? But apparently, it's like super duper popular here. It's like, it's the, if anybody's drinking whiskey, that's what they're drinking, right? That's all they drink. And they love it. right? Whiskey, Buchanan's, right? They'll have some Chivas Regal, but that's the de facto. And as I said, for anybody from Scotland coming here and seeing Buchanan's, they'll be going, what's that? Never seen that before in my life. Right, but there you go, fun fact. It might be the same in other places. It's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it's really like popular in Japan as well. You know, you see these weird adverts that you've never seen with like the, you know, film stars in it. Like, let's say Sean Connery, obviously he's dead, but you would see him in weird Japanese adverts selling some weird whiskey that you've never heard of. Right? Well, that's what it's like here, right? The other one is Johnny Walker. Right? There's a lot of adverts for Johnny Walker. And the funny thing is, in Scotland, you'll never see an advert for Johnny Walker. Right? Not in the TV anyway. Or not, let's say the last time, 15 years ago, when I was in Scotland. You never seen adverts for Johnny Walker, but it, you know, it's a thing here. Right, so here, the interesting thing is you can see that there is displacement snow. Right, now we did sort of bug test this. Right? And you will notice our issue in that it doesn't displace, but it does do something. And that is, it changes the texture. Well, Jack Daniels isn't a whiskey, it's a whiskey. Right, so if you see our guy here, right, you'll notice that he hasn't created footsteps, or he hasn't created footsteps in the displacement map, but he has changed the texture. Right, so it's cut through the texture to give us our ground map, which is where his feet would have hit. Right, but it's just not doing the tessellation thing. Now, we do know that there's an issue with that. Like, you'll see it actually happening with me here as I walk, right? You'll see I'm creating a trail. Right? But it's not moving the snow. It's just sort of changing the texture. Now, we do know about that. And it's something to do with the tessellation. Right? Now, but what we had heard, or I had read, is that this particular asset uses tessellation, right? But in earlier versions of Unreal Engine 5, they had removed the tessellation from Unreal Engine. But then I'd heard they'd moved it back in. So this just might need rebuilt or something. Not 100% sure on that. But the good thing is that everything else is working, right? Everything else is working as it was, no problems. You can shoot stuff, you can kill stuff. Everything still basically works. Right? So no problems there, apart from shaders, of course, 267 of them. Right? I'll have to have a look at that one. But this is what it's going to be for a couple of days. We're going to have to... I've got it, that's alright. But now you can see we've got our ground, we've got our sea, everything's working, we've got our weather, everything's good, our characters doing the right things, etc, etc. It was never a point of getting to work in Mr. Spock. right? Our big issue was the 7,000 assets that were in our original 4.27 world, right? That was the problem. So it was up to me to basically get those 7,000 assets out of 4.27 and into the map, world partitioned map in 5.1, right? So that the level streaming would all work perfectly, right? You can now see that our fires are working beautifully. Right? We've got a volumetric fog issue. Now I'm guessing that is, well, it could be anywhere. It could be in a couple of places. Right? But it's basically, I think it's in our CPP. It might be in our weather controller. It's a possibility. So basically what we're going to have to do is just basically go through this and check the volumetric fog settings, I suppose. As I said, this could be in here. Doesn't look as if it is. Right, that is just an arrow component and that's an audio component, so it's not going to be any of them. It could be in the infinity displacement capture, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Now then, this is the, yeah, okay. Now it could be in here. Or I might have to look this up. Or I might even have to open that up.